Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutia of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury. Tell Us About Yourself. Conversations with Game Show Contestants is produced in partnership with the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York, one of the largest history museums in the United States, and one of the leading museums serving families with highly interactive exhibits and programs. Since 1968, the Strong Museum has been dedicated to exploring the ways in which play encourages learning, creativity, and discovery, and how it illuminates cultural history. And their National Archives of Game Show History. Founded by industry veterans Bob Bowden and Howard Blumenthal, the archive is home to thousands of artifacts representing over 80 years of broadcasting, including props, set designs, video interviews with game show professionals, and other iconic elements from the history of television at play. For more information about the National Archives of Game Show History or the Strong National Museum of Play, visit museumofplay.org or call area code 585-263-2700.
Blue 35.
Tell us about yourself, would you?
Tell us something about you.
For any new viewers, why don't you tell us again about yourself?
We've met before, but let's meet again. Tell us about
What
yourself.
else can you tell us about yourself?
Perhaps you'd fill us in again and tell us about yourself.
I'm Derek Daly, originally from a suburb of Akron, Ohio, and now living in Chicago, and I am a cybersecurity project manager. I've been on 4 shows. I was on Academic Challenge in Cleveland 3 times between 2009 and 2010. I was on GSN's version of The Chase in 2013. I was on the final season of the syndicated Who Wants to Be a Millionaire in April of 2019, and then I was just on The Price is Right that aired January 11th of 2024.
Derek, tell me about the role game shows played in your life before you got to become a contestant on so many shows. When you were growing up and aspiring to do this kind of thing, assumedly, what did game shows mean to you?
Oh, game shows have always meant so much to me. I think I became obsessed with them probably before I even really knew what they were. I had a grandmother, my dad's grandma, that was a huge Wheel of Fortune fan, and so I'm pretty sure that's where I started watching. Was watching with her. Both my parents coached high school basketball, and my paternal grandparents lived pretty close by, so we were over there a lot as they babysat us, my brothers and I. And I think that's where I got started on Wheel of Fortune. My other favorite was Cash Explosion Double Play, which is still on the air, which is pretty amazing. It's been around since 1987. And Cash Explosion was actually the first game show taping that I ever went to when I was about 4 or 5 years old. They do a lot of road shows throughout Ohio, and I went to one. And all I remember is that they had so many technical problems. I don't even remember how many episodes they taped, if it was just one or more than one. But we were there for hours. And it's not really surprising after that experience that my parents never took me to another game show taping again, because it
You
was
just don't
just
have the
such a
time.
train wreck. Yes. Yeah. But yeah, game shows have been a part of my life. Oh, gosh. Yeah, pretty much since I was an infant. And as soon as I was old enough to start recording them, especially Wheel of Fortune, I recorded them and watched them as often as I could.
Remind me what Cash Explosion is. I think, is it one of those like lottery shows that the Midwest is kind of famous for?
Yeah, it's pretty standard. It's all luck. They have a board. Well, it's actually very different now, but I'll just describe the traditional format. So there's a board with 6 columns, 4 squares in each column, DOUBLA for double going across, and then PLAY going down. And essentially, you just stopped the randomizer and picked, an open square on that column, and you won whatever was behind. And then after 3 rounds of that, whoever had the most money, they had their score doubled and went to the final and could win up to 200 grand.
Those shows are fun, in my opinion, because it's all happiness. It's all just people winning money, because the contestants usually, and I don't know if it's the same case with Cash Explosion, but the contestants are usually people who have already won on like a scratch off ticket, and they mail it in and they get called to be on the show. So it's already people that have won and are just there to win more. And there's like no downside to it, other than the fact that, if you get there and you want to win $1 million and you win 100,000, maybe that's a downside. But still, I mean, it's so much money, and it's just pure happiness for a half hour. That's why I love those like local lottery shows.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. In its heyday, it was pretty much as you described. It's a little bit more subdued now. I don't know. I recommend, if people are interested, the current show posts their episodes every week on YouTube. It's a lot more subdued. It's not as exciting as I think as it was back in the day. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're showing up, you're getting free money. Usually, I think the minimum was like 3,000 or 5,000. I mean, you're just getting money for doing pretty much nothing, and that's pretty exciting, regardless of how well or not so well you do. So yeah, it was a very fun half hour, and definitely pretty easy to see why someone like me, a young child, would be attracted to a show like that.
Coincidentally, last season I talked to a man named Eric Daly, who was on a show in California called The Big Spin that was sanctioned by the California Lottery, and he won a little over $6 million. And it was at a time when the lottery program had a lot of like bad publicity. I think some like what they deemed an illegal immigrant won like a big jackpot, and it was all over the news. And the California Lottery was just like not looking good, and it was like his win that sort of transformed the image of the lottery. But yeah, Big Spin, again, one of those shows that is just working class people who won a lottery ticket, spinning a wheel and winning money. It'll always work. It's always good to watch people win things.
Yeah, but Cash Explosion, I think, is at least the only weekly lottery game. I think there may be some other states that do like one-offs occasionally, but Ohio is the only one, I think, left with a weekly lottery game show left in the U.S., which is pretty surprising, just because of how fun and easy it is, for contestants to win. But I think they're the lone survivor.
Yeah, there are a few states as well that do a similar, I guess, a big spin kind of thing where they have their own wheel, but it's not on TV. They just do it for YouTube. They'll live stream, and the audience
Yeah.
will be, maybe 10 people standing there, but these people won the right to spin this wheel. So whether it's on TV or not, they get to spin it and win whatever they land on. But even that, I think, is, can be engaging. It's just, and it's what attracted me to game shows when I was a kid as well. It's just pure positivity, pure happiness. And, there's no bad way to look at a fun game show.
Yeah, no, it's super fun.
So let's talk about academic challenge for a minute, because I am always envious of people who, growing up, had access to Quiz Bowl or similar things. Where I went to school, we just didn't have that, and I would have loved it, because I think it would have been an outlet for a lot of the material I enjoyed when I was younger. How did the opportunity to appear on Academic Challenge manifest for you? What led up to that, and how did you get that opportunity?
So I'm very grateful to my maternal or paternal grandmother, as I mentioned, and then two other women that are very special to me in my game show and trivia journey are my high school Quiz Bowl coaches, who are the late Marsha White and Marilyn Young. I was singled out. I went to a very small school district in Ohio for my entire K through 12 education. And I was singled out as a pretty smart kid early on. And so when I was entering high school, they apparently knew about that and recruited me to be on the Quiz Bowl team. And I was the only freshman. My freshman year, I was the only person in my grade, I believe, on the team at all, JV or varsity. And I was on the varsity team with like 4 or 5 seniors. And unfortunately, we were really, really bad. I just don't think there was a lot of enthusiasm, and we just didn't know the stuff that a lot of the other schools knew. And so our record was pretty bad. I think it was like 2-21, which is, just horribly demeaning. And then the next year, when I was a sophomore, I recruited a bunch of my friends to be a part of the team. And we went from winning 2 matches to winning 13. So an over 6-fold increase. And then the next year, when I was a junior, was when we got invited to be on the TV show. And it had been, I was thinking over the weekend, I'm not 100% sure, but it had been at least 5 years since we were last on the TV show, which was pretty unusual because they do a really good job of rotating throughout the schools throughout Northeast Ohio. And usually they try to get you on every other year. So the fact that it had been at least 5 years since we had been on was pretty unusual. So I think they just really contact the schools via email. We'd like your school to be an academic challenge. And it's the school's responsibility to, if they don't have a team, get the players together. And if they do have a team, have a playoff or whatever and determine who's going to be on. And then generally what we did, at least I think this was pretty common, just, get a school bus and whatever parents and players and whoever gets on the school bus, and we just ride up to Cleveland. And it's very simple, very, pretty low key, pretty no frills compared to most other game shows. But it happened at a great time, because if it had happened, when I was a freshman or sophomore, we probably wouldn't have done as well. So again, we were on when I was a junior, and we were pretty good. Unfortunately, we played against a team that was incredibly good, so good that their score was good enough to qualify them for the championship. So what Academic Challenge and It's Academic and all these other shows do is they call it a tournament, but it's not really. Essentially, whoever's the 3 highest scoring teams throughout the season get to come back and play one more time at the end of the season. And this team that beat us tied for 3rd. Unfortunately, I think they lost in the playoff, which was a little disappointing. I was hoping that, because they kicked our butts so well, that they would have gotten invited back and would have gotten to play, but they apparently lost in the playoff and didn't get on. So, that was a little disappointing. I was like, oh, this is our one chance. And we got slaughtered by this team that was really good. And then surprisingly enough, at the beginning of the next school year, we got an email from WWS, the affiliate that runs the show. And they said, oh, we want you to be, we want your school to be on again. And this was just so bizarre because, this just did not happen. You did not get invited back the year after you had been on. I mean, it had only been like 6 or 7 months since our episode had aired. But for whatever reason, they invited us back. And this time we were the butt kickers the second time. In fact, one of our 2 opponents never once attempted to buzz in the entire episode, and we just slaughtered the two other teams. And we were actually the season premiere, which is pretty cool. And we scored the same score that the team that had beaten us the year before. We had the exact same score, and we managed to hang on the rest of the season and qualify for the championship, which was a really cool experience.
That's very exciting. And I want to, so it's really exciting, but I want to talk for a second about the loss, about that first time, because one of the sort of core philosophies of getting on a game show that has come up time and time again as I've talked to contestants for this show is the idea, and it's something that I feel as well, but it's the idea that getting on the show itself is the prize, that you beat so many people in that process, in that audition process, in that tryout, the tests, and, they boil it down from, the 5,000 people that audition to 500 to 100 to the 10 people that are going to be on the show, for that tape day. At that age, and knowing and loving game shows as much as you did at that age, were you able to process it in that way? Was the idea that you were able to be on TV and have this experience any consolation for you?
Yeah, I would say so. Quiz Bowl was a pretty big part of my high school experience. And I knew that, if we got on, I was going to be one of the three people for sure, because I was probably our best all around player. And I was very nervous the first time. That's the only time, thankfully, that I've been on TV where I've really been nervous. And I think that was a really good thing for me to get that experience out of the way and just kind of, I guess, get my sea legs, if we want to call it that, of being on TV. So that first experience again, our score was respectable, even though the team that beat us was super high scoring, scored really high. Our score was very respectable, and, it was just a good experience for me to, be on TV, get recognized, have family and friends watch. And yeah, I think even if we hadn't gotten invited back, it would have been a very beneficial experience for me regardless, just because I got comfortable being in front of the camera and I got comfortable answering questions and playing a game. And yeah, it was invaluable. And unfortunately, it's too bad that a lot of people don't get that experience that are passionate about game shows, because that's a great place to start, because you're playing for nothing. The students get absolutely nothing. Even in the championship, we got absolutely nothing. So yeah, it was a great training wheels, whatever we want, not to demean the show, but it was a great first experience to have that as my first game show, because it was low stakes and was kind of up my alley in terms of what the show represented anyways.
Yeah, I've talked to a lot of contestants who were grateful for having their first experience on a game show be something local, as opposed to, walking on the set of Jeopardy for the first time ever and, experiencing all of that, to the face, but having that sort of, like you said, training wheels, practice, being able to acclimate yourself to that setting in anticipation of future experiences, which it turns out you did because you were invited back to the show. So I imagine that had a hand in feeling like victory was within the realm of possibility that second time. The fact that you were already there, you kind of know the atmosphere, it's something that you were attuned to.
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I know the opponents that I mentioned, I felt really bad for them because I don't think any of them had been on the show before. And I could tell that they were incredibly nervous, even when, for folks who aren't familiar with its academic challenge format there, it's alternating between competitive rounds with the buzzer and then non-competitive rounds where every team gets a chance to answer questions without interference from the opponents. And even when they were in their non-competitive questions, I could just tell that they were super nervous and, obviously very smart. They're not going to put stupid kids on the show. And we didn't have that problem because my one teammate and I had been there before. The other one, he had not been, but, 2 of the 3, we had been there the year before. We were comfortable. We actually sat at the exact same podium we sat at the same podium all 3 times, which I thought was kind of interesting. And we were super comfortable. And the other thing was, it was funny. We didn't give it the second time we were on. We didn't give a wrong answer the entire episode. And then the very first question that we buzzed in the championship episode, I buzzed in and got it wrong. And then as the host is introducing us for the first non-competitive round, he says, "Oh, Akron, Manchester. They didn't miss a single question the entire, their entire previous appearance." And I was like, "Well, you just jinxed it, and I already got a question wrong in this episode, anyways." But yeah, just being there before was such a huge advantage, and yeah, if we hadn't been there before, there's no way we would have qualified for the championship because we were comfortable when we were in our element.
Did the experience of being in a TV studio and being on camera speak to any of your aspirations at that point in your life? Did you want to be a performer? Was that something that was on the roadmap for you?
That's an interesting question. So personally, I think game shows are about the one area of performing where I think I would do well. I have not acted. I've acted a very small amount in middle school. I was in our school musicals for 4 years, but I don't think I'm a very good actor. And I think until pretty recently, I would have said that I've a person that had a lot of stage fright. So outside of being on game shows, I don't think there's much avenues in the entertainment or show business world where I would do well, or where I'd even be able to get a foot in the door. But I knew that I wanted to be a game show contestant. And I'd actually, since you mentioned Jeopardy, that was the first show that I ever auditioned for. It was the very last year that they did everything in person, essentially. The online test did not exist. And I, entered the random draw. I think it was probably online at that point, but I got randomly selected. I took the test. This was for the teen tournament. And I didn't pass the test, which was great because there was no way I was 13. There was no way I would have been a competitive contestant. But yeah, after that point, being an academic challenge, I was like, oh, I definitely want to get on game shows. And I was actively auditioning for game shows at the national level, I think pretty quickly after that. So I knew that was what avenue I wanted to take. And, if I was going to be involved in show business at all, it was going to be as a contestant on a game show because there was nothing else that I was really strong at.
And part of that audition process for a game show, for a quiz show, we'll say, because it seems like it's been a lot of quiz shows that you were on in your sort of career as a contestant. A huge part of that process is the knowledge portion of it. A lot of people don't realize that most shows where they ask you questions and you give the answers, there's a test that you have to take in order to make it to the next part where they want to learn about you and learn about your personality. What strategies did you employ in terms of maintaining your knowledge base as it came to trivia? Like, how do you keep that sharp?
I play so much trivia. I was very fortunate. I'm going to skip ahead a few years because in the high school era, there wasn't a lot that I did other than just play a lot of Quiz Bowl. I was very fortunate when I lived in Ohio. I was recruited to join a really good Buzz Time trivia team. For folks that don't know what Buzz Time is, it is a national, I guess I should say international because it's the US and Canada, an international live trivia format where you play against other bars and restaurants across the US and Canada. And it was just a fluke. I had a friend, I was a student at the University of Akron at the time. I had a friend that invited me because she knew I was good at trivia. I had been on the chase at that point. And the captain of the team was actually one of my former professors. And I got addicted very quickly. We're an incredibly good team. And I played with them pretty much every week until I moved to Chicago. And then I just joined a different Buzz Time team after moving here. But I play a ton of trivia. I have a trivia routine that I do every day. I haven't actually started it today. I'll have to kick it off at some point later in the day. I do a lot of Sporkle quizzes. I watch a ton of trivia game shows. Yeah, just a lot of repetition, a lot of reading. I've always been a huge reader. I was fortunate that growing up, I mentioned my dad's mom, my grandma on that side, but my mom's parents owned a bookstore in Northeast Ohio for 35 years. And I was really fortunate to have a steady stream of books coming my way as a child and young adult. And I think that played a huge part in my upbringing. I was really the only grandchild that was ever interested in trivia. So I don't know if it was just a fluke or if that had a lot to do with it. But Yeah, I was really lucky that I had a lot of opportunities to do things like that, even at a young age. And then just as an adult, um, I'm a single man with no children, so it's pretty easy to pursue hobbies. And so I've been pretty fortunate that even, after moving to Chicago, that I've had a lot of opportunity to do a lot of trivia things and play trivia usually 2 to 3 times a week.
Well, what a beautiful privilege it is as well to, excuse me, um, what a beautiful privilege it is as well to be a child surrounded by books. I mean, for somebody who loves to learn, and somebody who loves to know, and somebody who loves to read, I mean, I feel like that sets you up for any number of things where your knowledge base will come into play.
Oh, absolutely. And yeah, I just can't discount that experience at all and having that. And yeah, my grandparents were, well, I should say my parents as well, because my parents were both teachers as well. And having, education, and I guess I would say competitiveness as well, because I come from a very sports oriented family as well. My parents both played college basketball. My parents both coached, I mentioned earlier, coached high school basketball. So education, and then also just being competitive, were really strong components of my upbringing. And I think that has a lot to do with my love of trivia, because I'm not very athletic outside of running. I can run, but that's about all I can do. So I channeled that, love of education, love of reading, love of trivia, love of, being competitive into, trivia and being on game shows. And again, I think that's pretty unique to my family, because I don't really have anyone else in my family that loves trivia or loves game shows. But I saw that that was my niche, and I took advantage of it. And, I have for 32 years.
There are a lot of school districts that count Quiz Bowl as a sport alongside football, alongside basketball. There's Quiz Bowl, there's academic competition. Your family, having had that background in sports, did they immediately see the merit in you participating in trivia? Was there any sort of I don't want to say this. Quiz Bowl isn't a sport, but did they see the value in it as much as they might have seen the value in you participating in something like track or football or basketball?
I don't really recall. I would just say, it came pretty naturally to me. I got that invite to be part of the team, pretty much within the first few weeks of starting high school. And, I was already part of the cross country team at that point. It was, a pretty small school, and there weren't many runners. So, I'd already established my athletic bona fides, being a part of the Quiz Bowl team, there's just another additional thing. And yeah, I mean, my parents were always very supportive. All 3 times I had a lot of family and friends come to the tapings of Academic Challenge, especially the championship. We had so many supporters, primarily from my school, but all 3 schools, but primarily mine. We had so many supporters that they had to rearrange the seating because we didn't have enough room to accommodate all of the people that came. So if you watch the episode, it is on YouTube. You can see they had to be really creative. In fact, I think they had to move a couple of people during I'm forgetting the term, but the shots going in and out of commercial, when, for example, when they would display the trophies, they had to move people because there were so many people that they had to put them in that way and then have them get up and move during the transitions to commercial, because the studio was that full. So yeah, I had a lot of support, and there was never pressure from my parents or anyone else to really do anything like that in particular. But, once I picked it up and, started to have a lot of success, I had a lot of support, both implicit and explicit. And, that made me feel really good about it. Yeah, I was definitely supported. And it was not a sport. It was not treated as a sport at my school. The program, as I mentioned, was pretty bad before I joined, and I won't take sole credit for turning it around, but we were historically a terrible program. And if Marcia and Marilyn had not taken it over, it probably would have been discontinued as an extracurricular. So will always be super grateful to them for taking it over. And then for their successor, Lisa Barnes Prince, who's the current coach. And I assisted her for about 10 years before I moved away. If it wasn't for them, that program would be gone.
wonderful to have that level of support at that age. A lot of people who have these sort of narrow or esoteric interests don't necessarily get met with the same level of enthusiasm. This is a long way to say game show people did not have many friends growing up who were also into game shows. So it's great to hear that you had that, that level of support.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky for sure.
The Chase is a show that is very near and dear to my heart. Now, you were on in 2013, did you say?
Yeah, I was on first season, same as you. We did not
Yeah.
overlap, but we were close to one another.
That was such an experience in many ways, and I wonder if you agree with any of what I'm about to say, but I watched the UK version of The Chase through BitTorrent when I was supposed to be managing the campus radio station. I was watching it every day in my office, and I was addicted to it. And there was nothing else like it on TV. It was such a pure quiz show. I don't think since Jeopardy there's been such a pure quiz show. It was just so good. And the news that it was coming to America took me completely by surprise, took all my friends by surprise. And it was surreal to suddenly be auditioning for this show that I really only watched in my office. It was like growing up in the United States, seeing shows from the UK, seeing shows from other countries, it feels like you're watching TV from another planet, and you don't realize just how popular and how significant those shows are in those countries. So seeing The Chase come to the United States and having the opportunity to audition for it, knowing all about it going into the audition, it was just a very surreal experience. And even getting to be on the set later on, it was just mind-blowing. It was a place I never thought I would be. What relationship did you have with The Chase around the time that you auditioned? Because that was, the year that they announced that it was coming to America.
Well, I know that I watched it. I had watched it online. I don't know, maybe on YouTube. I'm guessing YouTube was probably a little bit less strict with copyrights at that time, or maybe I was kind of heavily involved with Blog TV as a participant, not as a creator or streamer. But I'm thinking that I may have watched people stream, the UK version on Blog TV. But I was definitely very familiar with it, and I think the primary reason why I auditioned for The Chase when I did was because I was thinking strategically, if we want to call it that. And I said, I'm 21, I'm really young at that point, but I said, this is a brand new show. And I think that if I go and audition, there may not be that many people that audition because there may not be that many people that know about it. And so I don't remember what the circumstances were because I flew there. It was over the weekend. But I was a student, so I'm not sure if it was our spring break or I don't remember. But my thought was, this is a new show. It's a show that I think I could do well at, and I think there may be less competition because people don't know what this show is. I was very wrong about that point, but that was my mindset going in.
Yeah, that's another thing too. The idea that this experience spoke to so many of us who were familiar with the show, and being able to watch the show every week. It was a very special time that first season of The Chase aired, because every week I was seeing somebody I knew. I was seeing people who I had, communicated with online for years, and it was just like a big party. It was just so many of my friends just getting on TV and winning money and being able to watch and celebrate. It was just a very, very special, very unique experience. Did you know a lot of the other season 1 contestants?
That's an interesting question. So I'm going to dive. You'll see what I mean in a second. But some of this that I mentioned in the story is not confirmed, conspiracy a little bit. So I knew Jeremy Nelson, who I believe you've interviewed in the first season of this podcast.
Yes.
I knew him from online. He was the only one that I knew. And when I was chosen to be on the show was very generous. I paid for your entire trip on their dime, which was essentially your consolation prize if you lost.
Right.
And when I got to the hotel at Universal in Hollywood, Jeremy had just also arrived as well, which is really cool because, again, he was someone that I knew from the online, but we had never met. And we did our contestant briefing in the hotel lobby. We hung out the rest of the day. We went to dinner together, whatever. And the next day, I'm coming down to the lobby, with my outfit and whatever. And Jeremy and the other guy who I had hung out with were both down there, and they were just kind of dressed in street clothes, and it was really weird. And I said, well, aren't you guys going to the studio? And they said, no, we got a phone call last night, and they said, we're not going to use you, and essentially don't bother coming to the studio. Which was, really sad, because I kind of gleaned from the contestant briefing the day before that Jeremy was going to be one of my teammates. So I have two theories about this. The first is that someone screwed up in the contestant department. And one of the premises of the chase was that the three people competing together were complete strangers and did not know each other at all. And they kind of backed this up at the studio, in that you had to share a dressing room with someone that was taping the other episode that day. You weren't sharing a dressing room with one of your teammates. So I'm thinking that the possibility is that someone screwed up, and that Jeremy and I were not supposed to meet each other. We weren't supposed to have a contestant briefing together, and they realized their mistake and had to make an adjustment that way. That's one theory. My other theory is I taped on the last day. They taped 8 episodes, I believe, across 4 days. And the day before mine, both episodes had the contestants win, and they gave away $305,000. And I'm wondering if they made some rearrangements with the contestants because they were potentially over budget. And so I'm not sure about the second episode, but I think both of my teammates on my episode were both locals that they called in at the last second. I don't know who my other teammate was supposed to be, but I'm pretty sure both of them had gotten called in at the last second to replace Jeremy and whoever else was supposed to be my other teammate. So, that was kind of unnerving to know that, I come really close to going all the way out there for nothing. But, it was what it was, and I just kind of rolled with it. So,
yeah. Well, let's talk
Jeremy
about
was
this
the
for a
only one that I
second,
knew.
because I thought, speaking about the idea of the conspiracy theory, quote unquote, I always thought it was number 2. I thought that the show was very heavily budget controlled, and I think that the control even came down to the teammates and how well they did maybe on the test, or just how good they were at the game period. And I think that they stacked the teams to facilitate an easier time with the budget. So that was always my suspicion, because I was there for tape day number 2. Number two. Yeah, it was the second one, because my buddy Cory was on a team with 2 heavy hitters. They split $180,000, and I don't know who I heard it from that it happened the day before, but I heard that we were borderline going to be canceled that day. They were going to send us home because somebody had broke the budget and they couldn't afford to do our shows the following day. My suspicion was always that the teams were rearranged according to how well the last one did. Do you know what I mean? Like that was always, and it's never been confirmed. I don't even know that I want it to be confirmed. That's okay. You know what I mean? It's fine.
Yeah.
I had the experience. I have no regrets about it whatsoever. I did as well as I could. My teammates, I have no comment. But other than that,
yeah, I would agree from watching your episode that no comment's the best way to go there.
I wish them all the best in their future endeavors. But yeah, that was always my suspicion, that it was just very heavily budget driven. Because I don't think Game Show Network had ever given away that type of money before. I mean, they used to give away, I think, like $100,000 on Russian roulette. That was like the biggest prize I'd ever seen on Game Show Network. But yeah, this was like uncharted territory for them, giving away that much money on every episode.
Yeah, or at least the potential to do so, because they gave away $0. Spoiler, they gave away $0 on the day that I taped between the 2 episodes. So yeah, the budget was very well controlled. They got what they wanted on that last day.
I remember being very heavily pressured indirectly to take the high offer and to gamble. Do you remember that part of your experience on the chase? Do you remember them periodically asking you how you were feeling and whether you were feeling like gambling everything?
That's interesting. I don't remember them saying or acting in that way at all. The only thing I remember them pressuring me on was saying what I would use the money what I would do with the money if I won, because I had something that I did really want to do, but it wasn't very TV. It wasn't very glamorous. I don't know if I'd say not TV friendly. And they had essentially made me come up with a prize, out of whole cloth. It was nothing that I was ever going to do with the money. But that's all I can really recall. I don't really recall much pressure. And I kind of had an idea about how much money I would have liked to have won. And I stuck with that script. But that was about the extent of the pressure, was just the TV ready story about what I would do with the money if I won.
If you're comfortable with it, what did you want to do with the money, and what did they tell you wanted to do with the money?
I wanted to buy a used car, and they changed it to me buying a Mustang. So close, but not the same.
I'll tell you mine. It wasn't on the Chase, but it was on Match Game years later. In 2019, I hadn't gotten on the show for this reason, but the driving force behind wanting to make a little bit of extra cash at that time was not only to pay off a credit card, but my father-in-law had prostate cancer, and we wanted to bring him to the Radio City Music Hall Christmas show because they never gotten to see the Rockettes. We wanted to bring him and my mother-in-law to see the show before things got worse and he wasn't able to travel. And they changed that to, I'm an aspiring DJ and I want to buy new equipment.
Oh, wow. That's not even close. At least mine was close.
It's not even close at all. But honestly, my contestant coordinators who weren't on board with me changing what I wanted to do with the money, they were on my side the entire time, and it was a very nice sort of personal celebration afterwards. Like when because I won $5,000, which was a goal achieved, but they sort of knew what it really meant. So it was a nice little, again, a little private celebration. But I look back on watching that episode, I always feel silly saying that. So,
oh yeah, I'm the same. I have to skip over my interview every time I watch it because it's just so cringy.
On that subject, how good are you at watching yourself on TV, period?
It depends on the show. I think The Chase, I generally tend to not watch, which is funny because one of my friends actually just created a YouTube video with just my portions of The Chase. He had never seen the episode, and he got a hold of it and created a clip, video. But The Chase, really haven't seen that much. Academic Challenge, I think I watched the championship episode a couple of times because it's on YouTube. The other two I have at home in Ohio on VHS, so I probably will never watch those until I get those converted. Millionaire, I watched the second episode a few times. Price is Right, I've watched myself, oh my gosh, probably 36 times since it's aired, and it's only been 3 months because that was by far the most exciting one for me. Was Price is Right. But the short answer is it's varied.
Yeah, same here. Price is Right. I've seen, I could lip sync that video, I think, at this point. The Chase and Millionaire, I need to leave the room when people watch it. Whenever I start a job or whenever I have some new sort of social interaction, there's always a point where somebody like Googles my name and finds the video of me and Millionaire. I go, oh my God, you were. And I cannot be in the same room with people watching the video. It was just such a young and inexperienced and hammy version, I think, of who I am now that I just like you said, I cringe every time. The Chase a little, I could watch it. Again, I'm proud of how I did. I think, of course, hindsight's 2020. I think I would have done so much better years later. So sometimes I wish I had that experience years later, but yeah, Price is Right. I could watch forever and ever and ever. It's like seeing myself in a dream. I'm sure you feel the same way.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I can't wait till we get to that part. But the Chase, I feel similarly to you. I did about as well as I could have. So I mentioned my teammates, and I don't want to throw them under the bus. I am not in contact with either one of them, but if they ever listen to this, I just want to mention that I was not throwing you under the bus. And I was the third to go. My first teammate, I thought she was the strongest of the three of us, and she got caught. The beast caught her, which was like horrible for me. I'm like, oh no, this is a horrible start. My second teammate, he got 4 or 5 right in the cash builder, and he stepped forward. He took the low offer, and he made it very quickly. He had no problems. I got 5 right. I stuck with the middle offer. I brought it back. I would say, a mediocre score in the final chase. And then Mark came out and got 15 in a row correctly. And we pretty much automatically lost. And that was fine with me. If I had to lose, I was perfectly fine losing where I was absolutely never, ever going to win. And so I was totally okay with it.
But again, that experience, I think, is softened by the fact that it's a free trip to California. It's a
yes.
2 nights in a hotel room. It's a free, at least one dinner. I remember getting like a cash stipend, to have dinner and, see California, which I hadn't been to California since I did The Price is Right in 2007. So it was, losing was definitely not as, it didn't feel or taste as bitter as it could have, because there was so much else surrounding it that felt like a win.
Oh, absolutely. And I think for me too, I was 21 years old. That was the first time I had been on a national game show. And I think they really did kind of play up the fact that I was so young. And I was their youngest contestant I was definitely the youngest contestant in the first season. I don't know if they had anyone younger than me until they had like a special teen episode that was in either like season 3 or season 4. So I think outside of that, I may have been the youngest contestant on the GSN run. I'm not going to say that as a fact, but I know for sure I was the youngest in season 1 and was probably one of the youngest, if not the youngest, for the entire run outside of that one episode. So just to be there and, the caliber of the people that I was chosen over, because as I mentioned, I thought, this show, no one's going to audition for this show. And the caliber of the people that were at the audition was just, oh my gosh, it was so overwhelming. There were so many people that had been on Jeopardy. There was, I think it's David Legler, who had won, at one time was the biggest U.S. game show winner ever from 21.
Right.
The fact that I got chosen over all those people was pretty cool. So there was very little for me to complain about.
Who was your host when you were on Millionaire?
It was Chris Harrison. I was on at the very, 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 very end of the run, about a month before the show ended.
Millionaire is a very interesting show to me from a contestant standpoint, because there aren't many other shows that share that same sort of environment. It's you and the hosts center stage, and you're surrounded by the audience. And I think that the environment puts a sort of responsibility on the host to guide the contestant through that experience. There aren't many other shows like that. Like when I think of the other shows that I was on, I don't think about Bob Barker guiding me through that experience. And that's maybe because I knew the show kind of inside and out. I don't think about Brooke on The Chase, guiding me through that. But I had Meredith Vieira on Millionaire, and I definitely felt more at home because of the way that she kind of extended herself to me. It's a very one-on-one interaction when it comes to being on that show. How did you feel with that in mind about your experience on Millionaire and kind of being led through that by your host, by Chris Harrison?
So Chris is a very nice guy. I had a pretty good conversation with him during stop downs. And I mentioned earlier, I was on 2 episodes, in between episodes. We chatted. He was really nice. No Meredith Vieira, but pretty much known as Meredith. But he was very nice and I think that was his 4th season hosting. So he was very comfortable at that point with the show and with the format. I will say I was very unique in that I was told by the contestant coordinators that I was the only contestant ever that had when they wanted to be on an episode planned out. And I got exactly what I wanted, which was I wanted to be starting at like the 3rd or 4th segment of an episode. So I would get, the first 5 really easy questions in, and then the horn would sound, the episode would end, and there would be, an extended break before they started. So, I'd really get a chance to get my bearings and, get relaxed, get comfortable. And I think pretty much told them that's what I wanted. Told the contestant coordinators that's what I wanted. Obviously, they would have no control over that. And sure enough, that's exactly what happened. I started in the 3rd segment of an episode. I got 3 questions in. We went to commercial. They came back. We did 2 more. I got to the $5,000 milestone, and the episode ended. And I was just overjoyed because I knew I was going to be relaxed, comfortable. I got a break. I had to go back and change clothes. And so when we got to the real, like, heavy hitting part of the game where the questions really started getting serious, I was super relaxed and I had already been on stage for more than the average contestant would have been at that point. So if anything, that made me much more relaxed. More than anything that Chris Harrison could have done.
When you think about your experience on Millionaire, what is the one enduring memory that comes to mind above all else? What was the defining experience for you in that journey?
Well, it would have to be the question that I missed because I did not play very smart. So I did very well for the first, let's see, first 5, 17, 20. So there's 14 questions in the format at that point, and I missed question 9. And the first 8, I did super well. I was cruising. I didn't have to use a lifeline until the 8th question, and I asked the audience, and that was actually not maybe the best strategic move because it was a question on Greek mythology, and if you ask the average American, they're not going to be able to tell you a lot about Greek mythology. But
Sure.
I had an answer in mind, but I wasn't 100% sure. And, I said, we're pretty much getting to the point where ask the audience is going to be useless for anything other than to stall for time. So I asked the audience, and my friend, my +1, said that when the question came up, the guy next to him spoke the right answer, which was kind of funny to me, but I guess it was a question that the audience knew because they gave me like either 54 or 56% on the right answer. And, that was what I was thinking. I went for it. It was right, whatever. So we get to the next question, and it asked, what was President Trump's Secret Service code name? And when the question came up, I said, I don't know this, without any choices, but when the choices come up, I might know this. And the choices came up and I did not know. And I said, okay, whatever, I'm not going to try to, parse this out without using the lifeline. So I called down my +1. My +1 is one of my best friends, and he's a trivia host, and he writes all of his own questions. And by that point, this was taped in August of 2018. Trump had been president for almost 2 years at that point. I'm like, this has to have been something that he's written about. So I call him down, and as soon as it gets to the podium, he says, I have absolutely no idea.
Oh, no.
So I said, oh my gosh, I just wasted, I essentially have used 2 of my lifelines, and I've wasted 2 of my lifelines at this point. Neither one of them really added any benefit. So I was, trying to think. And I got fixated on an answer. And what the problem without me at that point was, I was very focused, very comfortable. The problem was this show taped in Las Vegas. And at that point, I had been in Las Vegas for a week. And I had been out there for Tacona. And Millionaire was essentially just a coincidence that it taped at the same time, essentially.
Tacona being the trivia championships of North America. Is that what that is?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
So for those who don't know, it's a huge trivia convention that does not exist anymore. But pre-COVID, it was this huge trivia convention in Vegas. And I had not slept very much at all for this entire week that I had been in Las Vegas. So I know that I was not thinking as well as I should have at that point. And I had watched the show obsessively. I had watched every episode for the past 2 seasons. And I did notice that there were patterns at times. And one of the things that I had noticed, but unfortunately did not recognize on my own question, was that whenever they had 2 very similar answers, one of them was right. And 2 of the choices were very similar. One was mogul and one was magnet. And I did not recognize that fact. And I chose a non-mogul, non-magnet answer, and it was wrong. And so I missed a question. I left 50-50 on the table, which was frustrating because as soon as we went to commercial, Chris Harrison comes over and is like, oh, if you used 50-50, it would have eliminated the answer you went with. And I was just so frustrated. And I was just exhausted at that point. And I think if I had been of sound mind, I would have recognized that, oh, these 2 answers are really similar, and I would have not used my +1, and I would have gone with the right answer, which was mogul, because it just sounded a lot more right than magnet. I mean, that's very similar terms, but I think if I had been paying attention and locked in and not as tired as I was, I think I would have, I like to say that I would have recognized the fact that, there are 2 really similar answers, and I would have gotten the question right without using the lifeline. And instead I used the lifeline and I got it wrong. So 5,000 was nothing to sneeze at, but it was really frustrating because I knew that I could have done a lot better.
Sure, if only you had gotten so. And you are illustrating a lesson that you and I both learned on the same show. Because when I was on Millionaire, I could not sleep the night before because this was the fulfillment of an enormous dream that I've had for years and years and years, because I was always fascinated with the show. And it was like Christmas Eve. I could not sleep. So I was on maybe 2 hours of sleep when I was on Millionaire. And if you look at the level of energy that I exuded on that episode, you would never know it. But I was absolutely exhausted. And I think that if I had gotten a decent night's sleep, if I had focused on the game rather than the trappings and the show and the lights and being on camera, I think that I would have done a lot better. And I think back, and it is a little frustrating because I wish I had, I mean, like anyone else who wins, you know, something on the low end on Millionaire, I wish I had one more. But I also know that in that state, I just was not able to. And I just wish that I had put some emphasis on rest and focus. And I think I would have done a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, I did not have that luxury. And just to summarize what is a very long story, the day that I taped Millionaire was the third day across 2 seasons, the third day that I had been at Millionaire as a contestant. I had been there the year before. It was a similar circumstance. I had gone to Tacona. I went to a taping, auditioned. They called me 3 weeks later. They said, "Can you be here tomorrow?" Which is an insane ask for someone that's like 3,000 miles away. I said yes. I got my +1. We went out there. I didn't get to play. I went back the next year. I went to Tacona again. I went to a taping. They recognized me. Essentially, they asked, "Oh, we're taping tomorrow. Can you come back and be a contestant?" I said, "Yes, I will." So, because I was already out there. There was, I wasn't paying anything extra. So I went back the next day. What happened was they needed a civilian because they were taping all celebrity episodes that day. And so I was the alternate. So I sat at the studio all day again and didn't get to play. And they said, "Can you come back this was, I think, a Thursday. They said, "Can you come back Tuesday?" And I said, yes. And that's when I actually got to play. So just the fact that I was on, because I had been there for, we'll say 8 to 10 hours twice without getting to play, the fact that I even got on was just such a relief at that point, because I had been through the ringer with them. And just to get to play was just a relief, because I got that dream crushed twice at that point.
Now, when you appeared on The Price is Right, was that your first time seeing the show in person?
No, it was not. So I am very lucky to know a lot of other Price is Right. We'll say super fans, because that's the term that the show is using. Sure. And I had been a huge show of Price is Right since I was 10 years old. And I had never been to a taping until the fall of 2022. And a lot of that was because when The Perfect Bid, and I know you've interviewed both Ted and Terry, when that occurred, I was like, well, I'm too big of a fan of the show. They'll never call me. So I never went to a taping. And the first episode that I went to, period, the first episode that I had ever been in the audience was the Superfans episode, because Tony Harrison, who you interviewed very recently, is a very good friend of mine, and he invited me to be his guest, one of his guests. And I was like, oh my gosh, yes, I'll just go, because I knew I wasn't going to be a contestant, but I'm like, I'll just go, it'll be fun. And to have that be my very first taping was pretty awesome. I'm like, well, the bar is going to be incredibly high. No other episode will be as good as this one unless I ever get called. So that was my first. I went back with Tony. Tony did not get called on that episode. I went back with him on the episode he did get called on, and he played 10 Chances perfectly. For those who didn't listen to his episode, Tony was the first person in well over 2 decades to play 10 Chances perfectly. I was the one who gave him the price of the car, which was pretty cool. And so those were the only tapings I had been to before the trip that I went out on and became a contestant.
Well, let's talk about that, because you giving him the price of the car is a detail that I was not aware of, even from talking to Tony, who I had a wonderful time talking to, by the way. Did you, how do I ask this? I don't want to say, did you know the price of the car? Because when it comes to knowing the correct answers on The Price is Right, it's not just either knowing it or not knowing it. There are so many patterns and so many algorithms and so many clues and hints? And how did you arrive at the price of the car?
It was, well, the whole playing was a group effort, I'll say. I just want to mention this other part as well. So the 10 chances game, the two-digit prize, it's a 50-50 shot. I don't think we knew. My other friends and I that were there, we didn't know. He just guessed right. The three-digit prize was a desktop computer. And my friend Tristan Bauer, who was there as well, he had seen that exact computer on an episode that had aired like a day or two before. It was used in Any Number. And it was very distinctive. It obviously stuck out in his mind because it was incredibly cheap. It was only $570, and you pretty much can't get a computer for 570, a desktop computer for $570 anymore. So he remembered that, and he was like, "Oh, it's 570. I just saw this." So we said 570, and Tony was looking right at us and got it right. So that was super exciting. And the car was a Kia Forte, and it's a car that they use over and over and over again. And I think I knew what the base price was. And this one had I think it had 4 options, but they were all really small. And as soon as Drew, revealed the 5 numbers, I was like, I'm pretty sure I know what the price is. And the numbers were 0, 1, 2, 3, and 5. I said, I'm pretty sure it's 21,530 because there's enough options. I think the base price was like 21,2 something. And I said, pretty sure there's enough options that it has to be 21,530. And I convinced the other 2 to go along with me, or I just screamed louder than they did. And if you watch the clip, you'll see Tony, mouthing and, flashing the numbers just to confirm that, that was what we thought. And it was an educated guess from watching the show a ton. And fortunately, it was right. And, he swept the game. It was perfect. And you can see me in the audience just jumping up and down like a complete idiot because I was just blown away that, we had, we got to have that happen. Yeah, it was just incredible, but it was part knowledge and part educated guess.
The Price is Right is such a beautiful, The Price is Right is such a beautiful atmosphere to experience in person because it is 300 people. I don't know how many it is in the new studio now that they moved to Glendale, but it's hundreds of people in a room and they all want the person on stage to win. It is just, I don't know in what other aspect of life an environment like that might exist. It was life-changing. And I know that people who go see the show don't expect that to carry over. I get a lot of questions about, do you know if you're going to be a contestant when you go? Do you know what you're going to play for? Is that excitement real? Do they tell you to scream and jump up and down? That is all naturally occurring. That is, and I'm sure you can vouch for this. That is something that that just happens. That's the energy that's in the room. That's the energy that they create. And it's beautiful. It's a beautiful atmosphere.
Oh, absolutely. And when I got called, I was absolutely shocked. I was the 6th contestant called on my episode. And that was the second and final episode I was going to see on that trip. And I had interviewed really well. And I was like, oh my gosh, I've come all the way out here. And I had the wrong mindset. I came out there specifically to get called. I didn't go just, to see the show. I went because I wanted to get called. And, at that point in the episode, I'm like, I went all the way out here and I haven't been called. And the first 2 games were lost and they were very easy setups and no one listened to us. And, we could have been 2 for 2 and we were 0 for 2. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so depressing. And then I got called and, it was just like flipping the off switch to on. And, I was just so excited and I had a super long come on down. Unfortunately, they edited a lot of it out, but, I was on, I wasn't nervous. I was super focused. And I know, again, it was because I had been on TV multiple times before that. But as soon as I got down to contestants row, I was focused. I was ready. I wasn't overwhelmed. And it was absolutely surreal.
Were you in the new studio in Glendale or were you back at Television City when you were on the show?
No, I was in Glendale. That was the first time I had been there. Again, I had been there the day before and hadn't gotten called and came back the next day. And yeah, it's very similar to Television City. If you haven't been to the new studio yet, it's very similar. There's only a few small changes, but it's very much the same atmosphere, pretty much the same people, both on and off camera. It's remarkably similar.
Yeah, I'll think a lot of people who maybe casually watch the show, I don't know if they're aware or not, but the show had been at Studio 33 at Television City in Los Angeles for 50 years. The show started in 1972, and it had become the Bob Barker Studio at one point, but after half a century, they moved to a new production facility in Glendale. And I remember the couple months between the last taping at Television City and the first one in Glendale, there was this, I'll call it a panic among some of the hardcore fans of the show that were afraid that it was going to look different, that they were going to redesign the set in a way that was, going to be unfamiliar, that it was going to look like, it was going to look cheaper, it was going to be smaller. And if you watch the show, I mean, you and I might notice some differences, but to a average person who watches The Price is Right, it's almost indiscernible.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think the main thing is the raised contestants row. That's pretty noticeable. But I think other than that, there's very few differences. And yeah, they really didn't change much. I'm a little surprised that they didn't, but they changed very little.
I mean, which is good. That's a show that thrives on, I think, on familiarity and nostalgia. Even now, it looks a lot different than it did, in the 80s and 90s, even, the last couple years of Barker's time on the show. But it still retains that familiarity, I think, in its format, in its gameplay. So I think that's probably a good choice to maintain that level of familiarity.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's the same. If the average person would have pretty much no idea that they had moved.
In closing, Derek, I'd like to ask you a question that I get asked all the time by people who have heard the show, by people who haven't heard the show, by people that don't even know I have a show. I get asked all the time, how do you get on so many game shows? And my answer varies depending on the length of time that I want to spend talking about it. I mean, there is no real secret, I don't think, but I think that there's an aspect of, knowing what to do in the audition. There's an aspect of, just having the right personality, maintaining that interest in trivia, in games, in entertainment, and just being in the right place at the right time. It's a mixture of a lot of different things. How would you answer that question? How have you been fortunate enough to have this experience over and over and over again?
I would say two things. One is try to aim for a less stressful or local show first. I think being an academic challenge, as I mentioned earlier, opened some doors for me because, they had seen that I think probably for the chase, they had seen I had already been on TV a couple times, was comfortable in that environment. So if you haven't been on a game show, I would try for something smaller stakes first, get that experience before the camera, show future contestant producers or coordinators that you have the ability to be on TV and be a good contestant. The other thing I would say would just be very persistent. I've gotten really close to being on several other shows. I mean, as close as an example, a show I won't name, I won't mention. I actually filled out non-disclosure agreements for that show and then didn't get on. So that's, about as close as you can get without being a contestant. I think the number of shows that I've gotten close to being on and being projected at the last second is probably maybe even higher than the number of shows that I've actually been on. So if you want to be on, you learn something every time from a show that rejects you, and just keep trying. I'm definitely not done. I cannot wait till my year of being ineligible is over, because there's a couple other shows that I have a very strong interest in getting on. And as soon as I'm eligible to go on another show, you can absolutely bet on the fact that I will be back on the auditioning process once again, because my journey is not finished yet.
Tell Us About Yourself, Conversations with Game Show Contestants, is hosted, produced, and edited by me, Christian Carrion, from my studio in beautiful downtown Lancaster City, Pennsylvania. Co-executive producer Cory Anotado. Researcher Chuck Donegan. This has been a production of BuzzerBlog, the most popular game show website in the world, in partnership with the National Archives of Game Show History at the Strong National Museum of Play in Rochester, New York. For more information, visit museumofplay.org. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Christian Carrion. Good night. Tell Us About Yourself is sponsored by bonusround.ca, streaming Canada's classic game shows on demand. Dive into the golden age of television with thousands of episodes of Canadian series that defined an era from anywhere in the world, all for just $1.99 a month. From iconic shows like Let's Make a Deal and Definition to cult classics like Bumper Stumpers and The Mad Dash, bonusround.ca brings you timeless entertainment that's fun, enlightening, and affordable. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, relive the magic of Canadian television history. Subscribe now at bonusround.ca for $1.99 and turn every night into Game Show Night. By Game Show Forensics. Join host Robert McKee and his crack team of forensic game show scientists as they take you on the deepest dives imaginable in a quest to analyze the most detailed minutia of game shows nobody else dares to, or cares to, investigate. Nothing is too whimsical for examination, no semantics too absurd for the research extremists at GameShowForensics.com. Parental discretion is advised. And by The Inn at Leola Village. Nestled in the heart of picturesque Pennsylvania, the Inn at Leola Village is a sanctuary of luxury and relaxation. Indulge in the timeless beauty of their historic suites, each meticulously designed to transport you to a bygone era of elegance and grace. Experience the culinary delights of their award-winning Italian restaurant, where every dish is a masterpiece crafted from the finest local ingredients. From romantic getaways to corporate retreats, the Inn at Leola Village offers a haven for every occasion. Unwind at the spa, stroll through the lush gardens, and let the stress of everyday life melt away. Make your reservation today at theinnatleolavillage.com or call the front desk at area code 717-656-7002. The Inn at Leola Village, an oasis of luxury.